Christmas parade crash. What we're learning about the incident that injured a priest and parishioners. Fed chair. President Biden reveals his pick for the top economist in the country. Build back better. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill weigh the future of the Democrat spending plan. And get a preview of the Pope's trip to Greece. We'll take you to Athens. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 22nd, 2021. Good evening from Washington, D.C. On this feast of St. Cecilia. I'm Eric Rosales. Tracy has the night off. The community of Waukesha, Wisconsin is grieving the deaths of 5 people and praying for 48 others injured after an SUV drove into the Christmas parade yesterday. Now, the horror was recorded on the city's live stream video. Police report 39-year-old Darrell Brooks Jr. of Milwaukee is in custody. Investigators say prior to the incident, he was involved in a domestic disturbance and was out on bail. Among the injured were Catholic priests, parishioners, and at least 6 children, all listed in critical condition. A statement from the Archdiocese of Milwaukee says, quote, "Please join us in prayer for all those involved, their families, and those who are traumatized from witnessing the horrible scene." Philip Crowder is an international affiliate reporter for the Associated Press. He joins us now from Waukesha, Wisconsin. Philip, it's been 24 hours since this tragic event took place. What's the scene like out there?
Yeah, it's pretty tragic. It must be said this is a town that, of course, one always says it is trying to come to terms with what happened, as you said, almost 24 hours ago now. You can see traffic is back here, and that main street behind me is back open again. But I can tell you that earlier I saw the fire department here of Waukesha trying to get rid of some of the bloodstains still on that street. I saw an abandoned children's shoe in the middle of the street before that was taken away. Just a few signs of the pure chaos and the violence that happened here last night. There is still a lot of work to be done, of course, to somehow get over this, but there is going to be a prayer vigil here tonight, and then there is also going to be a Catholic prayer service as well. Of course, those who were injured and those who were killed came from all walks of life, including among the dead an 81-year-old man and members of a dance troupe called the Dancing Grannies. And among the injured, well, there are children from the age of 3 to the age of 16.
Yeah, what more do we know about, in particular, the Catholic priests and other Catholics involved there?
Well, I just spoke to a member of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee to get some more details on how they are actually doing. But what we're dealing with here is pretty much the information that we got a while ago, that one Catholic priest here from the town of Waukesha was injured. We don't know yet whether he is out of hospital yet, and that there were also parishioners and Catholic school children who were hurt in that awful incident yesterday. Now, again, there will be a Catholic prayer service as well at St. William Catholic Church here in Waukesha. Just one of the many events, I suppose, is the best way to put it, for people to somehow get to grips with what happened here, to somehow heal. A lot of work there to be done. And of course, a Christmas parade like this one brings all sorts of groups together: Catholic groups, dancing troupes, young children, older people, all of them affected by this. It might even have been some family members of children watching them perform and maybe seeing the worst happening to them, being involved in this awful incident yesterday.
Definitely an awful incident out there. Now, police say that they do have a person of interest. Can you tell us any more about that person?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have that guarantee essentially from the police department here that Darrell Brooks, the 39-year-old, is the only suspect in this case, and that there is no connection to terrorism, be it domestic or international terrorism. But why did this person do this? We don't know. There is no motive at this point. You already mentioned there was a domestic disturbance just beforehand, but does that lead a person to run into a crowd of people who are having a joyous moment here together? Well, we might never know, but we do know that this person has a pretty long criminal record, and that some of that even includes an attempt to drive into someone with his car. So those might be some pointers as to where all of this comes from. The real explanation, of course, will be pretty much impossible to get.
Well, Philip, let everybody know out there that from all of us at EWTN News Nightly, we're going to continue to keep praying for them. Philip Crowther with the Associated Press, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us now is Christopher Bedford, senior editor at The Federalist. Chris, welcome back. Now, we're going to begin with your take on this Christmas parade tragedy in Wisconsin. It includes, how do you think the media has been covering the event out there?
Well, they've shown a lot more hesitancy to try and figure out exactly what was going on, which maybe they ought to, than, for example, they showed for Kyle Rittenhouse, who they immediately called a white supremacist and a domestic terrorist. Everyone's saying, well, hold on a second. Let's pump the brakes and let's figure this out. And I applaud them for that. I wish they would do that more across the board. I'd also like to see more attention, significantly more than has been given, to the district attorney of Milwaukee, John Chisholm. This is one of the people who was backed by George Soros in his campaign. He's not an American citizen, but in his campaign to give funds to different district attorneys that were willing to get rid of bail and abolish the systems that we have for keeping dangerous and psychotic criminals off the streets and in prison. This person was just released a few days or weeks prior to running his vehicle into this Christmas parade, killing people, injuring many more people, attacking Christmas in this way, released on a $1,000 cash bail. Now, the district attorney's office has since said, well, we're going to review this because this is not in our principles. This should not have happened. Well, that's not true at all. This district attorney, John Chisholm, said that he wants to get rid of bail and has applauded, for example, the DA of San Francisco for being able to do that. When you do that, it has consequences. When you let criminals out in the street, it has consequences. On $500 or $1,000 cash bail, it says that our cities and our states and our counties don't actually put too much worry about crime on there and put people's safety secondary to that. And unfortunately, sometimes we see this in private and homes, in crimes and domestic assaults, and now we're seeing it play out in this awful, awful attack.
Well, this is an awful attack out there. And switching gears now slightly, you spent some time on social media discussing the Freedom for All Act. It's supported by nearly 24 Republicans up on Capitol Hill, and they say that it's an attempt to reach out to those who identify as same-sex attracted. Why do you say that this bill is concerning to the faithful and those who support religious freedom?
Well, this is something that Republicans have gotten together in an attempt to push back against some of what the Democrats are trying to push on a more radical agenda that defines what you associate your body as or what gender you claim to be as part of the Civil Rights Act, makes it protected. And that would impact hospitals, doctors, nurses, those who don't want to do these surgeries, homeless shelters, women who are now being housed with mentally ill men. It'll impact schools at a time when it's finally being exposed in Virginia and Tennessee and other places, actual attacks on children by people who claim to be of the other gender, attacking them in locker rooms or in their bathrooms. Republicans who are pushing this say that they're trying to do a compromise bill, even though no Democrats have signed on to it. So this compromise would make it so that it's codified now, these gender differences or these preferred pronouns, into American legislation. That would make it so that bakers or schools can be attacked. The only people that it actually defends are some very narrowly defined religious groups, like a religious charity, for example, religious schools or actual churches. But this is an absolute surrender that no one on the right is actually wanting. We're starting to see a pushback against this and a push for God's idea, for the Christian idea of creation and truth. We're seeing that in Virginia and elections across the country. These Republicans aren't just naive, they're stupid, because we've seen for the last 10 years over and over again that the radical gay lobbies that want to push these things aren't interested in compromise, aren't interested in just some kind of fairness or inclusion. They're actually targeting Christians, and this will open up the flank to allow private individuals and private businesses to be at the mercy of these advocates.
Now, Christopher, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops met last week in Baltimore, and they overwhelmingly approved the document on the importance of the Eucharist. Now, what do you think of this document, and did it go far enough?
I certainly would have liked to see it go further, but it was good to see it go anywhere at all. There were some worries among the Catholic, more Orthodox Catholic community that Rome was going to try and torpedo this entire effort and try to just neuter it completely. We didn't see that. There were some important lines put in there by the American bishops that are actually pushing to protect life, even from politicians, even from public figures who are breaking this rule. Now, this document will allow the local priests and local bishops to be able to execute Canon Law 915 and actually be able to decide on their own whether or not they're going to give access to communion to those who are publicly committing grave sin against the Catholic Church. That means that in the next couple months, I would be expecting some news to come out as more and more cardinals and bishops and priests stand up to this culture of death and push back against politicians, no matter how powerful they are.
We will wait and see. Okay, Christopher Bedford, senior editor at The Federalist, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
In other news, President Joe Biden addressed the tragedy in Wisconsin today, saying, quote, 5 families in Waukesha are facing fresh grief of a life without a loved one, and also said that people were celebrating a season of hope and togetherness, and he hopes that the same spirit will lift them and embrace the families and the victims. White House correspondent Owen Jensen joins us now with more. Owen.
Eric, President Joe Biden also thanked first responders, ER doctors, and law enforcement for what he called their extraordinary work, and he said his administration is continuing to monitor the situation. Meanwhile, also this afternoon in a speech, he said he's nominating Jerome Powell as Fed chair and Lael Brainerd for vice chair of the Fed.
President Joe Biden remembers those killed and injured in Waukesha, Wisconsin, saying he's praying for them.
And an entire community is struggling to cope with the horrific act of violence.
Then the president went on to explain his decision to keep Jerome Powell as Federal Reserve Chair another 4 years.
I believe having Fed leadership with a broad bipartisan support is important, especially now in such a politically divided nation.
Jerome Powell has been at the helm as coronavirus tore through the economy. The Republican was first elevated to his post by President Donald Trump. Among the Fed's responsibilities, keep prices stable and maximize employment.
We will use our tools both to support the economy and a strong labor market and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched.
Meanwhile, over the weekend, the White House released a report on Transgender Day of Remembrance, writing, so far this year, hundreds of anti-LGBTQI+ bills have been introduced in state legislatures. Many of them target transgender children, seeking to prevent them from receiving appropriate and gender-affirming medical care, from using the bathroom where they will be most safe, and from joining sports teams with their classmates. But that's clearly at odds with what the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops and other religious leaders wrote in an open letter in 2017, stating, God created each person, male or female. Therefore, sexual difference is not an accident or a flaw. It is a gift from God that helps draw us closer to each other and to God. And children especially are harmed when they are told that they can change their sex, or further, given hormones that will affect their development and possibly render them infertile as adults.
Now, that same USCCB letter also said, quote, we call for policies that uphold the truth of a person's sexual identity as male or female and hope for authentic support of those who experience conflict with their God-given sexual identity. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Up on Capitol Hill, Senate Democrats are set to plow ahead with President Biden's social spending bill. Changes will no doubtedly take place to the $2 trillion Build Back Better Act, which was passed by the House. They remain upset while Republicans say they worry about inflation.
That's going on across the country. It's caused by reckless government spending. And the Democrats don't want to stop. I mean, it's just bill after bill after bill. And they're going to, 1, raise your taxes, and 2, they're going to cause more inflation.
Creating jobs, lowering costs, fighting inflation, keeping more money in people's pockets. These are things Americans want and what Americans need, and it's what BBB does. We're going to keep working on this important legislation until we get it done.
Majority Leader Chuck Schumer also says he expects the Senate to start to work on the Build Back Better Act next week. Coming up, abducted missionaries, the new developments from Haiti, and the power of Jesus. Pope Francis offers a lesson about Christ the King. Two of the 17 missionaries who were kidnapped more than a month ago in Haiti have been set free.
We can confirm that 2 were released, but that's all we can say.
Officials with the Christian Aid Ministry say that they are working to free the 15 others still being held for ransom. Most are U.S. citizens, among them 5 children, including an 8-month-old. The missionaries were kidnapped by the gang known as the 400 Awazu. The FBI is also helping with the investigation. Well, the country of Chile could soon welcome a pro-life president. 55-year-old Catholic candidate Jose Antonio Cast is in a runoff election with leftist lawmaker Gabriel Boric. Cast took home a victory Sunday in the first round. The presidential election will take place December 19th. For more details on the pro-life lawmaker's background, just go to our news partner, Catholic News Agency, at catholicnewsagency.com. Pope Francis says Christ is not only a king, he is completely different from the rulers of the world.
Contano gli applausi o conta il servizio?
At his Sunday address to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father says our Lord is the ruler for everyone, and we can follow in his footsteps by seeking what is right rather than what is popular. Pope Francis also tells young people to feel comfortable at home in the church. Well, Pope Francis is preparing for a trip next week to Greece and Cyprus. The trip will last 2 days and will include a visit to Athens, the capital of Greece. The Holy Father will also travel to the island of Lesbos. It will be his 35th trip since becoming Pope. EWTN News Rome correspondent Colin Flynn joins us now from Athens, Greece. Colin, great to see you there. What can you tell us about the Pope's upcoming trip in 2 weeks?
Good evening, Eric. Yes, from Athens, the capital of Greece, where in less than 2 weeks, Pope Francis will be arriving as part of his Mediterranean papal trip. Now, this is his third international trip since the COVID pandemic began. And as you can see behind me, the world-famous Parthenon on the Hill, built over 500 years even before the birth of Christ. And this ancient city, the birthplace of democracy as well, with a population today of just over 3 million people, will be the stunning backdrop to the Pope's visit. Now, this trip will start on the island of Cyprus on December the 2nd, where he'll spend 2 days before flying here to Greece on December the 4th. And we'll have more details on his stay in Cyprus next week when we broadcast to you from there. But focusing at the moment on his Greek leg of the trip, this will be Pope Francis's second time in Greece following his one-day visit to the Greek island of Lesbos in 2016. During that time, the Pope visited a refugee camp and met with the people, and he heard their stories. In fact, he took 12 Syrian refugees back with him to Rome that were able to go on and claim asylum in Italy. It was a symbol the Pope was sending out to the world to be open to refugees and those who are on the margins. Now, the Pope will be returning to that same island again to meet some of the refugees still there in camps today.
Yeah, and speaking of the refugees, what's the situation like there for them at the moment?
Well, the situation is still ongoing, which is why Pope Francis will return to the island of Lesbos once again, which is just a few miles from the Turkish coast, and is why it has been a gateway for hundreds of thousands of people desperately fleeing war and poverty over the last number of years. But when Pope Francis visited last time in 2016, that was really at the height of the refugee crisis in Europe. Today, the numbers are smaller, but still in the thousands. They estimate there are around 3,500 people living still in the camps there today. In 2017, Pope Francis donated 50,000 euros to help people after the camp was hit by an earthquake. And last year, around 12,000 people in the refugee camp had their homes destroyed after a devastating fire.
And as we know, it's expected to be an event-filled trip for the Pope. What else is he expected to do while in Greece?
Well, Eric, as you can expect, there will be all the formal state visits, like a meeting with the Greek president and prime minister, as well as other officials from the Greek government. But the Pope will also be meeting with the new Bishop of Athens, Bishop Theodoros Kontidis, who was also a Jesuit and was appointed in July of this year, making him the most senior Catholic in the country, the majority of which is Greek Orthodox. And Pope Francis will as well be meeting the head of the Orthodox Church when he comes here. Catholics are the minority in this country, about 50,000 people, or 0.5% of the population, and a very diverse minority group with parishes divided by languages. So you have French, Polish, Ukrainian, English, and so on. Now, the Vatican released a statement where they said that as Greece feels the effects of the pandemic and the recent financial crisis, they hope that the Pope's visit would bring a ray of light for the future of Greece. And by the way, Eric, approaching 85 years of age, his birthday coming up in December, this trip will mark Pope Francis's 35th papal trip.
Oh, amazing there. Colin Flynn, thank you so much for joining us, EWTN News Rome correspondent.
Thank you, Eric.
Up next, international assistance, the fate of Afghan refugees, and annual tradition, how the White House is getting ready for Christmas. Months after the fall of Kabul, many Afghan refugees have found asylum in the United States and other countries around the world. Yet, according to organizations that help them escape, thousands can be stranded in other countries for years due to a backlog in the immigration system. From interpreters to judges, many say that they were promised a chance to come to the U.S. in return for promoting American goals during the 20-year war. And joining me now to discuss more on the current situation for Afghan refugees is filmmaker Jason Jones, president of the Vulnerable People Project and host of the Jason Jones Show. Jason, welcome back.
Thanks for having us on, and thank you for continuing with this, standing with the Afghans.
Amen to that. And conditions from the Afghan refugees is something that we remain committed to. And those who remain in control of the Taliban is something that we've seen and we've been following very closely. Can you give us an overview of the current situation out there, especially for Christians?
You know, every morning the first thing I do is I check my messages, and, hundreds of Christians, thousands of Christians are still in hiding. The weather's, it's cold. They're hungry. We're talking to people that are in, chicken coops, that are afraid for their life. We've lost people in the past couple of weeks to violence. Afghanistan is on the brink of civil war. You have a famine barreling down on the country. And of course, the most vulnerable are our co-religionists, Christians, in hiding across Afghanistan.
No doubt. And thanks to your organization, many of those Afghans have evacuated, but so many are still waiting to arrive to their final destination. What are you hearing from them, and how is your organization trying to help them?
Today's been a great day for us. We got an emergency surgery for someone, a refugee and his family that we evacuated to Pakistan, and a woman was fighting for her life. A country, I can't name the country yet, they gave us landing rights, so planes will be moving again out of Kabul. And the great light, the bright spot in all of this has been Brazil and its commitment to resettle Christians. And so thanks to Brazil, there's hope for Christians that we've moved to countries like Pakistan so we can move them to a final destination for resettlement. And just today, we were given landing rights to move planes to a new country as a temporary location while we still work to get their visas in the United States. The situation is it's become intractable, where 8 organizations have done almost all they can do, and now governments really need to step up and figure out a process to rush this, especially as civil war is imminent and there's famine already barreling down.
Exactly. What would you like to see from the United States and also the international community to do more to provide relief to these people?
Well, first of all, our own State Department. In war, there's always rumors, and this is really, I see a war. There are rumors that there's a expedited process that is about to be announced any day. You mentioned judges. We're working with women judges, women that served in the armed forces, and others who fought alongside our men and women in Afghanistan who they're being hunted. These are people we have a real responsibility to. And I would like to see the State Department, and there are American citizens that we're still working to rescue. So I'd like to see the State Department create a plan to really expedite rescuing those who served our country and fought alongside our men and women.
And specifically, what would you like to see our EWTN viewers do at home?
I'm glad you asked that. It's pray. The one thing that all of us can do is unite our prayers. I received an email yesterday from a thank you note from a group of young Christian women that that found our organization, and we were able to get them overland into Pakistan. And in this lovely note that these young women wrote us, they said, "Thank you. We had lost hope for our survival. We knew we were going to die, so we began to pray that God would just preserve our honor and our chastity." Now think about that for a second, and it will really hit home. And she says, "But then you, like angels, were there and saved our lives." And that really is because of our community, the Catholic community and EWTN community that has been donating and supporting and allowing us to rescue folks. All of us can unite in prayer with those Christians who are really hiding in fear for their life. They've witnessed the most horrible atrocities.
Amen.
And their hearts are broken. So many of them are losing their faith. So let's pray that they keep their faith, that God gives them this an irresistible grace to love him and to trust in him, and trust in the church, even in the midst of the most unspeakable horrors.
Jason Jones, thank you so much, president of the Vulnerable Peoples Project and host of the Jason Jones Show. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
And finally tonight, the White House has marked an annual tradition, the delivery of the White House Christmas tree. Arriving on a horse-drawn wagon, the First Lady received the tree this afternoon. The fir stands 18 feet tall and it is on display inside the Blue Room. The tree comes from the North Carolina farm, which won the national selection for the third time. Want to thank you for watching us tonight. I'm Eric Rosales. Tracy will be back tomorrow. Have yourself a wonderful night. God bless and good night.